The bracelet was already in Uloma's hands before her mother finished speaking. 4 generations, Mbeke whispered, her voice dropping the way it always did when she was telling the truth she did not want to tell. 4 generations of women who wore this and lost everything. One lost her husband to his own cousin the year after her wedding. One lost 3 pregnancies and never tried again. One went mad before 40 and nobody in this family says her name out loud anymore. She paused, watching her daughter's face. Do you understand what I am giving you? Uloma understood perfectly. That was the problem. She turned the bracelet over in her palm, dark corroded silver with coral stones the color of a bruise, heavy and cold, nothing like the bright celebratory jewelry village brides wore to their weddings. This bracelet did not celebrate anything. It had been made to end things. Give it to Adaeze, Uloma said quietly, at the wedding as a gift from me. Mbeke looked at her daughter for a long moment. She did not say no. If you are just finding this channel, welcome. You are exactly where you need to be. This story will shake you. Subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Now let us go back. Uloma had watched Adaeze be chosen her entire life. Chosen for the lead in the village nativity play at age 9. Chosen by the women's group at 17 to carry the basket at the harvest festival. Chosen by Emeka, Chukwuemeka Okafor, architect, Abuja-based, son of a retired judge who walked into Mazi Uchena's compound on a Saturday afternoon with wine and kola nut and his father's walking stick and asked for the hand of the second wife's daughter without even glancing toward the left wing of the house. Without even glancing toward Uloma. She had stood behind the curtain of her mother's doorway and watched the whole thing. She watched Mazi Uchena laugh louder than she had heard him laugh in years. She watched Ngozi cry the kind of tears that come from answered prayer. She watched Adaeze, radiant in a yellow blouse, press her face into Emeka's chest right there in front of everyone, and she heard him say, she heard him clearly, I chose well. Uloma pressed her hand flat against the mud wall and breathed slowly. She was the firstborn. She was the one who knew the names of every root in the forest behind the compound. She was the one who sat with her mother since childhood, learning the old things, the deep things, the things that took years to understand. She had given her youth to knowledge, while Adaeze gave hers to laughter and church rehearsals and learning how to make people love her effortlessly. And still it was Adaeze who got chosen. Emeka had looked at Adaeze the way no man had ever looked at Uloma, with hunger and reverence at the same time, like she was both a feast and something sacred. Uloma had been looked at with wariness her whole life. Men sensed something in her they could not name, and they walked in the other direction. She was 29 years old, and no suitor had ever sat in their compound with wine and kola nut for her. She was done waiting to be chosen, so she chose something else entirely. The morning of the wedding, the compound awoke before the sun. Women moved through the courtyard carrying trays of food, their wrappers tucked tight, their voices already loud with celebration. The drummer arrived early and started without being asked. Children ran between adult legs, shrieking with joy. The smell of palm oil and crayfish and something sweet baking in the kitchen filled every corner of the morning air. Adaeze sat in the center of the right wing, surrounded by women who loved her, while someone painted her hands with henna and someone else wove gold thread into her braids. She was glowing, not metaphorically, literally, her deep brown skin catching the early light like she had been polished from the inside. Uloma stood in the doorway watching. She was holding a small velvet pouch. Inside it, wrapped in fresh silk, was the bracelet. She had spent the previous night repackaging it carefully. New cloth, a small handwritten card tucked inside that read, "For my sister, from our mother's line. Wear this today and carry our family with you." She had written it in her neatest handwriting. She had even pressed a dried flower in the fold of the silk. It looked like love. It was designed to look exactly like love. Adaeze looked up and saw her standing there. Her whole face changed. "Uloma!" She stood up immediately, scattering the women around her. She crossed the room and took both Uloma's hands in hers. "You came. I wasn't sure you would come." "Of course I came," Uloma said. "You are my sister." Adaeze searched her face. There was something in her eyes, not suspicion, just the old familiar hope, the one she had carried since childhood, the hope that one day the distance between them would close. "I brought you something," Uloma said, and held out the velvet pouch. Adaeze opened it slowly. When she saw the bracelet, she went very still. "Uloma, this is beautiful," Uloma said. "It belonged to our grandmothers. I want you to wear it today." Adaeze lifted it from the silk and held it up to the light. The coral stones caught the morning sun and glowed dark red, almost like something breathing. She should have felt something, some warning, some coldness in her fingers, but she felt nothing except gratitude. "Help me put it on," she said softly. Uloma clasped it around her sister's wrist herself. Her hands were completely steady. "There," Uloma said. "Now you are ready." Adaeze pulled her into a hug, her arms tight and genuine. Over her shoulder, Uloma's face was completely blank. Outside, the drums got louder. Emeka's convoy was turning into the compound. He stepped out of the lead car in a deep burgundy agbada that made 3 women nearby forget what they were saying mid-sentence. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the unhurried confidence of a man who had worked hard and knew exactly what he had built. He scanned the compound once, and then his eyes found the doorway where Adaeze had just appeared, and everything else stopped. "Adaeze," he said, just her name, like a full sentence. She walked toward him slowly, and he met her halfway, taking her hands and looking at her face the way a man looks at something he cannot believe is real. "You are too beautiful," he said quietly, meant only for her. "I keep thinking I am dreaming, and I keep not waking up." She laughed, that full, unguarded laugh, and he pulled her close right there in the courtyard, in front of everyone, and pressed his lips to her forehead first, then found her mouth. Someone in the crowd screamed with joy. The drummer doubled his tempo. Uloma watched from the doorway. She watched Emeka hold Adaeze's left hand up to show the family, the bracelet catching light on her wrist, and she felt something move through her chest. Cold and satisfied and terrible. Good, Uloma thought. Wear it well. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Abuja received Adaeze like it had been waiting for her. The apartment Emeka had prepared was on the 4th floor of a quiet estate in Maitama. High ceilings, large windows, warm light pouring through in the mornings. The first time she walked through it, she stopped in the middle of the living room and turned slowly, taking it all in, and Emeka leaned against the door frame watching her with that look he always had, like her happiness was the whole point of everything. "Do you like it?" he asked. "Emeka," she turned to face him. "Did you do all of this before you even knew if I would say yes?" He shrugged, unbothered. "I knew." She threw a cushion at him and he caught it, laughing, and then she crossed the room and he pulled her in and kissed her, slow and certain, his hands cupping her face. And she thought, standing there in that warm light with the city spread out below them, that she had never in her life felt so completely held. The bracelet was on her wrist. She wore it most days without thinking about it.
It had become part of her, the weight of it familiar on her skin, a piece of home she carried into her new life. When colleagues at the school where she had gotten a teaching position commented on it, she told them it was a family heirloom and she felt pride saying it. She believed the story she had been told. She believed her sister had given her something precious. Back in Obanniwi, Uloma was waiting. She was waiting for the phone calls that would start with a trembling voice. She was waiting for news that Emeka had become cold or distant or cruel. She was waiting for the miscarriage, for the fight that could not be taken back, for the slow unraveling that the bracelet had promised across 4 generations of women. She checked her phone every morning. She watched Adaje's messages, cheerful, frequent, full of photographs with narrowing eyes. 3 months passed, 6 months, a year, nothing collapsed. Instead, the messages got warmer. Adaeze and Emeka had started attending a church in Abuja where the pastor prayed like the ceiling was thin. She sent photos of their anniversary dinner, Emeka's hand over hers across a white tablecloth, both of them laughing at something off camera. She sent a voice note once that was mostly just her humming while she cooked, and even that sounded like joy. Uloma stopped eating properly somewhere around the 8th month. She did not notice at first. She was too busy watching, too busy waiting, too busy tending a hatred that had begun to cost her more than she had budgeted for. Her abs stopped working the way they used to. Clients came with ailments she had treated easily for years and left no better. She began having dreams she could not describe in daylight, dreams where she was standing in water that kept rising, and the bracelet was on her own wrist and she could not get it off. She woke from one of those dreams at 2 in the morning and sat on the edge of her bed in the dark and said out loud to no one, "Why is it not working?" Mbeke appeared in her doorway. Her mother had always had that quality, appearing when she was needed most or feared most. Mbeke, because the house it entered is not afraid, she said simply. A curse needs a crack to move through. Fear is a crack. Doubt is a crack. Bitterness is a crack. She paused. That house has none of those things. Then make it stronger, Uloma said. Go deeper. Mbeke looked at her daughter for a long time. Something moved across her face, not quite regret, but something near it. Uloma, the thing we sent is looking for somewhere to rest. If it cannot rest where it was sent, she stopped. Say it. It will come home. In Abuja, on a quiet Tuesday evening, Emeka came home to find Adaeze sitting at the dining table staring at the bracelet on her wrist. Emeka said, "You've been staring at that for a while," setting down his bag. "Something feels different about it today," she said. "I don't know how to explain it. It feels heavy, not physically, just..." She shook her head. "I'm being strange." Emeka sat down across from her. He reached over and took her hand, turning the bracelet slowly in his fingers. He was quiet for a moment, in the way he always went quiet when he was about to say something true. "Can I pray over this?" he asked. She looked at him. "Why?" he said. "Because I love you and I cover what I love." She nodded slowly. He held the bracelet between both palms, still on her wrist, and bowed his head and prayed, like he did everything, without performance, without theater, with the steady, quiet authority of a man who knew where his power came from. He anointed it with oil from the small bottle he kept on the bookshelf. He prayed for the home. He prayed for her. He prayed against everything that had been sent that should not have been sent, naming it plainly without knowing its origin. Adaeze felt something shift in the room. She could not have explained it to anyone. The bracelet did not glow or change color. No wind moved through the closed windows, but something left. Something that had been sitting in the apartment so quietly she had not known it was there, simply departed. She exhaled a breath she did not know she had been holding. "Better?" Emeka asked. "Yes," she whispered. "How did you know?" He lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles, the bracelet catching the lamplight between their faces. He said, "I didn't know, I just know who I am." She reached across the table with her free hand and pulled his face to hers and kissed him with everything she had, not the kind of kiss or the romantic kind, but the kind that comes from recognizing you are safe, fully and completely, for the first time. Outside, Uloma woke from another dream screaming. If this story is gripping you, share it with someone right now. They need to see this. Like the video and keep watching. The announcement came on a Sunday. Mazi Uchenna called everyone to the compound, both wings, both wives, the uncles and aunties who only appeared for births and funerals. He stood in the middle of the courtyard in his best agbada with the look of a man who had been given something back he thought he had lost. "My daughter Adaeze is with child," he said, "and Emeka has been named lead architect on the new federal project in Abuja. They are coming home next month for the Thanksgiving." The compound erupted. Uloma sat at the edge of the courtyard on a low wooden stool. She did not stand. She did not clap. She sat with her hands in her lap and her face arranged into something that could pass for calm if no one looked too closely, and she watched her father cry tears of pride over a daughter from the other wing, and she felt something inside her that had been held taut for 2 years finally snap. She stood up quietly and walked back to the left wing. Mbeke found her an hour later sitting on the floor of the room where the bracelet had been kept, staring at the empty carved chest. "Mama, why didn't it work?" Uloma said, without turning around. Mbeke sat down on the floor beside her daughter. She did not answer immediately. "It worked," she said finally, "just not the way you wanted. Power always works, Uloma. The question is always on whom?" Uloma turned to look at her mother. Her face in that moment was not the face of a villain. It was the face of a woman who had been in pain for so long she had mistaken the pain for identity, who had held her bitterness so close it had become the only warm thing she owned. "I just wanted," she stopped, started again. "I just wanted someone to choose me, Mama. That is all I ever wanted. Just once, just one person to walk into this compound and look toward the left wing first." Mbeke put her arm around her daughter slowly. "I know," she said quietly. "I know." And they all looked at her. Yes, and I hated her for it. I hated her for something that was never her fault. She never did anything to me. She just existed, and I couldn't forgive her for existing so beautifully. Mbeke held her tighter, but said nothing. Some truths did not need commentary. Uloma traveled to Abuja 2 weeks before the Thanksgiving. She told herself she was going to see with her own eyes. She told herself she needed to witness the failure of her own plan in person before she could accept it. But somewhere on the bus, watching the landscape change from village roads to city flyovers, she admitted the quieter truth. She was going because she was lonely, and Adaeze was the only person in the world who had ever reached for her without being asked. Adaeze opened the door before Uloma finished knocking. She was visibly pregnant, her wrapper tied high, her face so open and unguarded that it was almost painful to look at. She stood in the doorway for one suspended second, and then she stepped forward and wrapped both arms around Uloma, her round belly and all, and held her in the doorframe of her beautiful Abuja apartment like she had simply been waiting.
"I'm glad you came," Adaeze said into her shoulder. "I have been praying you would come." Uloma stood very still inside the hug. Her arms stayed at her sides for 3 full seconds before something gave way in her chest, and she raised them slowly and held her sister back. "You prayed for me to come?" she managed. Adaeze pulled back and looked at her with those warm, direct eyes. "I pray for you every day, Uloma. Did you not know that?" Uloma did not answer because she could not. Emeka came home that evening to find both women in the kitchen, Adaeze teaching Uloma her recipe for ofe onugbu, both of them arguing cheerfully about the quantity of crayfish. He stood in the doorway watching, and then he caught Uloma's eye over Adaeze's shoulder and gave her a nod. Quiet, no ceremony, just acknowledgement. The kind of nod that said, "You are welcome in this house." After dinner, Adaeze fell asleep on the sofa with her head on Emeka's lap, exhausted the way only pregnant women can be.
and Emeka sat reading with one hand resting gently on her shoulder. The bracelet was on the wall, mounted on a small display hook between two framed photographs, catching the lamplight. It had not been worn since the evening Emeka prayed over it. Adaeze had simply placed it there one morning and said she wanted to see it every day, but did not need to carry it. It looked different on the wall than it had looked in the carved chest, less like a weapon, more like a witness. Uloma stood in front of it for a long time. She thought about 4 generations of women. She thought about her grandmother, whose name nobody said out loud. She thought about what it meant to pass suffering forward, to take the pain you are given and gift wrap it and hand it to someone you are supposed to love. She thought about how Adaeze had hugged her at the door just now without knowing any of it, without needing to know, without asking for an explanation or an apology, just opening her arms because that was simply who she was. Uloma reached up and touched the bracelet with 2 fingers. She was crying before she realized it, not dramatically, just quietly, the way you cry when something has been over for a long time and your body is only just receiving the news. She whispered, "I'm sorry," to the bracelet, to the wall, to the grandmother whose name was never spoken, to the sister asleep on the sofa who had done nothing except love people freely and been loved freely in return. Then she wiped her face and went to make tea. The Thanksgiving came, and the compound in Oba-Nnewi was loud again with drums and color and the smell of food that had been cooking since the night before. Adaeze stood in the center of it all, her pregnancy visible now, Emeka's hand at the small of her back, receiving blessings from every elder in the village. Uloma stood nearby, not in the doorway this time, not behind a curtain. She stood in the courtyard, in the sun, among people. And when the dancing started, and Ngozi pulled her into the circle laughing, she did not pull away. She danced badly, and knew it, and laughed at herself anyway. Adaeze caught her eye across the courtyard and smiled, just smiled, wide and unguarded and uncomplicated. And Uloma smiled back. It was small, it was imperfect, it was the first true thing she had given her sister in years. That night, after the guests were gone and both wings of the compound were finally quiet, Uloma sat on the front step alone and looked up at the sky. The village was dark except for stars. Somewhere, a night bird was calling. She thought about the bracelet on Adaze's wall. She thought about what her mother had said. Power always works. The question is always on whom. She thought about 2 years of waiting for someone else to suffer and how she had not noticed until now how much of herself she had spent on it. She sat with that thought for a long time. She did not have a resolution. She did not have a plan. She only had this step, and the dark, and the stars, and the first quiet inside herself in longer than she could remember. That would have to be enough to begin. The bracelet that carried 4 generations of sorrow did not destroy the woman it was sent to break. It returned to find the one who sent it, and it did not destroy her either. It simply sat beside her until she was ready to put it down. Some curses are not broken, they are outgrown. If this story moved you, drop a comment right now and tell me, where in the world are you watching from? I want to know. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story today, and subscribe so you never miss the next one. See you in the next story.